Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. Well, today I'm going to be talking about a watch that I thought possibly might be the G-Shock killer, or at the very least a possible competitor to it. It is this Nixon Regulus stainless steel. Well, at least this is the stainless steel version. It does come in some others, and I'll show you them when I do the sort of top-down section of this review. Now, I did say in my first impressions video of this one that I was planning to wear it for at least 3 to 6 months before doing the full in-depth review, and it hasn't quite been that long. And that's not because this is a bad watch, it is just purely because I feel now that I actually have a fairly good understanding of this watch, and I've had other G-Shocks in my possession during this period of time that I've actually been sort of comparing it against both on wrist and in my head. So, is it actually a G-Shock killer? That is the question that I'm asking. Or at least, is it a good competitor to the G-Shock? Is it worthwhile buying one of these Nixon Regulus watches? Well, first we should probably know a little bit of history about this watch, because when I looked at the Nixon brand previously, it really was full of sort of somewhat fashion type watches or basic looking digital watches, certainly watches that didn't really interest me. And that was until I became aware of this Regulus. This Regulus was actually developed in conjunction with an ex-US Special Forces officer. He wanted to go into this sort of trying to build a watch that I think he was deliberately trying to build a competitor to the G-Shock. He wanted to make something that was very visually perfect to what is needed for those kind of environments, something that could take a beating, something that would last, something that they could sort of adjust and use features that were actually worthwhile used by the US Special Forces. When they were then developing it, they then did trials with the US Special Forces and sort of got some ideas from them, got some feedback from them, and then they added that and changed the watch in conjunction with that feedback. Now, since that first impression, I sort of wanted to try and find out what module is inside this watch. Can we rely on it? Is it shock-proof? And I haven't been able to find out the full details of it. It is a custom Chinese-made digital module, and it does have a lot of protection foam around the outside of it. So there is actually sort of shock protection built into this watch. Is it as good as a G-Shock then? Can it take the knocks of a G-Shock? Well, I don't know. I'm not going to be testing it. This cost me money. My G-Shocks cost me money. I'm not really going to be running them over with my car. However, what I can say is now that I've worn it regularly for a couple of months, it certainly takes some bangs and crashes. I've whacked this a couple of times. There hasn't been any issues so far. But is it a good watch? Is it worth considering buying? Should you buy one? Should I tell you to buy one? Well, let's flip the camera around now. Let me show you the full review of this Nixon Regulus, and I'll try and answer some of those questions. Let's check it out. Well, today we're talking about my Nixon Regulus stainless steel. This watch I was planning to wear for 3 to 6 months before doing the full review of it. I have had it regularly on wrist for at least a couple of months now, and I'm at that point now that I really feel that I know the positives, negatives, pros and cons, whether or not this is a watch that you guys should consider buying, and really point out some features to it that really make it something a little bit special. Now, obviously I already have the watch out of the package, so let's put this aside because it does come in some good packaging, and we're not buying watches for packaging, but it is still a nice thing to have some nice packaging, especially from a more affordable watch. It does have the Nixon sort of symbol on the top, opens up, and let's have a look inside here. It says Nixon, ready, set, go, let's take on the world. And our box was designed with the planet in mind, please recycle. Now that is quite funny, isn't it? They're not saying that it is made of recycled materials. They're saying they've chopped down a tree, made this packaging, but you should recycle it. Okay, that aside, it's not bad packaging. And further inside, a little hang tag, a little bit of information about sort of the watch and what you can do with it. Nothing too special there, nothing too interesting. Let's get this aside and move it to the wall. And before we do, let's talk about pricing. This is the Nixon Regulus SS Black. It is the A1260000. This one here on the Nixon website in Australia sells for $349. However, immediately comes up with a 20% discount, so I didn't pay full price. There are other versions of this watch. There are other colors of this watch. If you decide to go for a resin version, not the stainless steel, they are a recommended retail price of $249, and I'm sure you would get that sort of 20% discount as well, speaking in Australian dollars. But let's check out the watch, because that's what we are here to talk about today, aren't we? What are my thoughts about it? Well, just like in the first impressions, this thing is an absolute beast, an absolute tank. It is a really well made, and it really comes across like that when you are wearing it. And I do get the feeling that it can take some bumps, takes some crunches, and I am comfortable with that with this watch. But let's talk about the size of this watch, because it is partly why I think it is a tank, why I think it is a beast, and what possibly might put you off this watch. It is the diameter there, including the pushes, because they do stick out, is 47.7 millimeters. The width, as you can see, it is a bit chunky. This one, it is 15.8 millimeters. Now, the lug to lug, technically it is 53.5 millimeters, but the bracelet does make it stick out a little bit. There aren't so much lugs, but it does make it stick out a tiny bit. There is a lot of downturn there, not only in the look of the case, but also in those sort of ends of the bracelet, but that makes it an effective lug to lug of 55.2 millimeters. The lug width is 24 millimeters between the lugs, but as you can see, the bracelet actually extends out further, bringing it out to 28 millimeters, but it then does actually taper back to 24 millimeters, sort of back to what the actual lug width is. Now, with two links removed, set for my 6 3/4 inch wrist, it weighs in at 225 grams. Now, normally that is the end of the dimensions, but there is another dimensions that I want to show you, and it is the size of the LCD screen. And I'm not including the black frame there, I'm including the actual LCD screen. It is 27 millimeters across by 21 millimeters high. So it's quite a nice, sizable LCD display, and I do quite like that about it. Nice and easy to read, nice and easy to see on wrist. Now, absolutely everything you see on this watch, other than the module and display there, is stainless steel. This plate on top, sort of bezel, I guess, stainless steel. The logo, Nixon, stainless steel. The case, it's one solid piece of stainless steel. As you can see, that's all milled stainless steel, really is substantial. The buttons, they are stainless steel, and you can feel them. They're really, really solid. Very nice feeling. The bracelet, solid stainless steel. As I mentioned, it doesn't quite have end lugs. It is more like the sort of end link, but that is solid as well. The clasp really is the only thing that is not as solid as the rest, but it is still obviously all stainless steel as well. Nixon, rather small, but we'll get back to that. Double fold over. Pressed clasp, not a too big drama with this particular one. I don't mind, helps to sort of reduce the weight probably a little bit. But what I'm trying to get across on this little part is that this thing is solid, and it is all stainless steel. Now, obviously you can see that this is a negative display, and on camera it doesn't show it off very well. It's not the best negative display that I've ever seen, but it is actually very good. And this stainless steel version of this watch only comes with a negative display. There are positive display options, and there's actually quite a few different options available. I'm going to stick up some different variations there on the screen. There's a gold stainless steel version, a grey stainless steel version. Then there's lots of different resin versions as well, different color resins, different sort of display colors, even the numbers themselves, as well as I said, positive and negative displays. So really, if you are choosing one of these watches, you're going to have quite a few different options available for you. As mentioned, recommended retail price of the stainless steel is $349 Australian, and you're paying $100 less for the resin version. Now, I've already said a couple of times this thing is very solid, but being solid doesn't always equate to being quality. Is this thing quality? Absolutely. This thing is so well made. Has all brushed everywhere on this watch. You can see the milled buttons there, mode and light. Nice milled insets into those buttons as well. Really looks good and feels good on the finger. But I think this is the view that really shows the quality off. Really nice brushing, as you can see there. Very fine, looks good, and lots of different interesting angles. You can see there is 3 angles coming this way, melding into 2 angles going this way, and 3 this way, and they're all nicely finished. Transitions really well, very smooth, no sharp edges whatsoever, no sharp edges anywhere on this watch, to be honest. Even on the buttons where they have that sort of inset sort of looking sort of cutaway, not sharp. Buttons here with those names written there, they feel nice too. No sharp edges on the bracelet. I'm actually rather impressed about the quality of this watch. I didn't expect this sort of level of quality from Nixon or this sort of priced watch. So that is an absolute standout feature. But obviously if you're buying a digital watch, you're looking to see what the functionality is. And what I'm going to start off with is the backlight, because this is a particularly cool backlight. There are 3 levels that you can choose from: dim, medium, and high. I have it set to high so you can see it nice and clearly, and it's the sort of level that I would use day to day when I have the watch. But it also has a really nice clear display. Now, as I said, it doesn't show on studio as well as it does in real life, so I'm going to click on the light a few times just to make it clearer for you guys. So along that top line, you can see it says time. I'm glad it tells you that it's the time, just in case you got a little bit confused. I have it set for 24-hour time. You can have it set for AM, PM as well. That top line there is obviously the time. Below that, we have 2 separate countdowns or 2 separate stopwatches, which is another feature that we have. And if you have those features running, you can then see it in this first screen. Below that, the day of the week and the date and the month of the year. Really nicely well set out, at a glance legible, absolutely legible. And of course, we have some different modes as well. If we click the mode button, it clicks to those 2 stopwatches. Use the backlight to show you again. 1 stopwatch, 2 stopwatch, 2 buttons, 1 for each of the stopwatches. Switches in the middle then now still shows you the time, the day, and the date as well, which I really do appreciate that. It does say chrono 1 and chrono 2. To activate those, you just click on the buttons on the sides. You can obviously pause them, and you can also reset them by holding them down. Next feature is a countdown timer, which you can set at different intervals. We then have 3 separate alarms, and we're back to the front screen, which I do appreciate. Keep it fairly simple. I do not want this to be feature heavy in regards to features. Otherwise you start getting a little bit confused. But personally for me, I just don't use them. I've had watches that have had thousands of different features and I never use them. Everything I use on a digital watch is right there on that first screen. That's all I need, plus the light. The only other feature that I really like to have on a watch is this top left button, which is a secondary time zone. Wonderful. Very easy to flick back and forth as well, just by clicking 1 button. And lastly, the bottom left button, just in case you're completely lost in time and you don't know what year it is. It is 2022 at the moment, at the time of recording this. And flick it back. So there's all the features, and there's a good amount of features. Now, I don't really need the dual stopwatch, but it's nice to have. I like how it flicks back and forth between the time when you go into that mode, and I do like having a secondary time zone. So how does it look on my wrist? Well, I have a 6 3/4 inch wrist, and just for your awareness, I like to wear watches on bracelets a little bit loose because I like a little bit of movement there, but I actually think it looks quite good on my wrist. Even though it's only a medium wrist, I think it sort of fits from the sort of overall dimensions, lug to lug, and the case diameter quite well. If I push it a little bit forward, I think it fits very well. It is very wide though, however, and it is noticeable. And because it is also quite heavy, you do feel that on wrist, obviously. And unfortunately, a lot of that weight is in the head of the watch, which means it does bobble a little bit. But that's not the biggest problem for me, because I do wear it a little bit loose. And if I have my hand down by my side, as you would normally do, you don't normally walk around like this, it then does sit. And I do feel occasionally, if I'm wearing it longer term, a little bit of pain here from it whacking into the top of my hand, which is not ideal. So that leads me into what do I like about this watch, what don't I like about it, and what would I change? Well, I do absolutely love the quality. As mentioned, everything seems to be done very well. bracelet is absolutely a standout feature, and that is surprising to me because generally more affordable watches, and I know this is not super affordable, but for what you get, I think it is actually quite affordable. Normally the bracelet is something that you do end up getting that's not great, but the fit and the finish is really good. I do like the functionality of it. I do like that it's all stainless steel. The size of the display I really do like. And I like how they've sort of used the module to give you those different features and display those features in the way they do. Very, very usable. And I like that they've done this all for a relatively affordable amount of money. You get a lot of bang for your buck with this watch, and I'm really quite impressed by it. But I don't like everything about it. Even though I think it is fantastic and very well made and very solid, it is a little bit heavy. Now, for me, I like a heavy watch, but 225 grams is very heavy. I do have my Seiko Samurai on a nice solid Strapco bracelet, which brings it close to 200 grams. Now, 200 grams I'm comfortable with. I notice it on my wrist, but I wear that watch day in, day out and have no problems at all, and I wear that one a little bit loose. This extra 25 grams, especially since I think a lot of it is up here in the head of the watch, does make it feel a little bit heavy. And that brings me probably to the second thing. Obviously, the width of the watch, it is a little bit chunky on wrist, and that adds into that weight, and that adds in how it sits on wrist. Now let's check out this case back, because it's actually a really good case back. Really sort of solid. It says Nixon Regulus stainless steel. Really well etched, really solid, but it kind of ruins the sort of shape of the watch. We've got this lovely case that sort of bends and curves down nicely, and then we have this case back that sort of juts out and really disrupts both that curve but also the thickness of the watch. Being a sort of a digital module, I doubt it's a particularly big digital module. I understand they've got a lot of that sort of foam protective stuff around to give it that sort of shock resistance. But all I could think of, and the thing that I would change the most about this watch, is if they could put that back case up into the case itself so that this curve here would be the base. If that was the case, it would probably alleviate part of the weight, it would alleviate the thickness of the watch, and it would sit even better. It would be absolutely fantastic. So obviously that's what I'm going to want to change about it as well. Have that case back sort of inset in, reduced, so that you just really appreciate that curve better and get a slightly thinner watch on wrist. Now the display, although it is legible being a negative displays are not my favorite. I do prefer positive displays. Unfortunately, from what I can find online, the stainless steel variations don't have the option of a positive display. But if I had the option to change, I would definitely go for the positive display. But overall, I'm rather impressed by it. But what are my final thoughts? Well, as always, let's flip it around. Back to me for my final thoughts. So is it actually better than a G-Shock? Well, that's a hard question to answer. I don't know the technical inside details of this watch compared to a G-Shock. All I can tell you is my opinion as somebody that has worn it, has enjoyed it, has owned lots of G-Shocks, and somebody that is enthusiastic about watches. What I'm going to tell you now is that it certainly is built extremely well. It feels better built than any G-Shock that I've ever owned. It certainly was affordable compared to similar sort of styles or similar type of build qualities G-Shocks that I've seen out in the market. It is certainly legible. The backlight is great. I like the size of the display. However, it is a little bit too heavy, and it is probably a little bit too wide on wrist. It is a little bit chunky. However, obviously it is available in a resin version that would be considerably lighter, so that would probably resolve most of the issues that I have with it. Not that there's that many issues. Also, by getting the resin version, it's $100 cheaper, so it even makes it a cheaper sort of equation in my head in regards to getting a good watch for a right price. So is this one perfect? Well, it's not perfect. What watch is perfect though? So I sort of keep that in mind when I am thinking about how good a watch is. For what it is, I think it's fantastic. It's certainly built very, very well. It does all the functions that I want from it, and it's at an affordable price. Could I wear it every single day as a work watch, which is what I've been trying to do? Well, I have to admit, I've probably been struggling with that a little bit, and that's mostly because of the weight. Overall, I like heavy watches on my wrist, so I don't mind. However, this one is that sort of next level of heavy, and I have to admit, when it's sitting downwards on my wrist, which is what you do when you're, it does sort of bang a little bit on the top of my hand, and after a day of wearing it, I do notice I'm a tiny little bit sore just in here. I'm not in any pain, but I notice that there is a sensation there, and that is from that watch banging on me. Now, that is partially my own fault because I do like to wear watches a little bit loose. If I wore this one tight, that would resolve that issue as well. So it's a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to trying to answer that question, is it as good as a G-Shock or is it better than a G-Shock? All I can tell you now is that I like it. I think it's made very well. I think it's worthwhile considering at the very least. But do some more research on it yourself if you are interested in it. If you do end up buying one, I'd love to hear your experiences with it. Leave a comment down below. Now guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I do really appreciate everybody who takes the time out of their day to watch me talking about watches. But that's all for today. Thank you so much. I do hope to see you in the next video.